10. The Orb. The following creepypasta is based on the game The Forest, and an orb that you can unlock at the very end of the game. This orb allows you to have two modes, blue where monsters don't spawn, and red where they spawn more and are attracted to the orb. This author got this orb and left it on red at all times. He made a farm that would collect him bones, creepy armor, and skulls, for decorating, you know? Well, after logging out of his game and leaving the orb on, he started hearing scratching. He looked out the window and laid eyes on what was scratching. Every monster from the game was coming for the orb, even though it was in the game. And at 9, Death at You. My name is Death, and I choose you. You're my friend, and I love you. When I rise, your life will end, and all this because you're my friend. You gotta love the poem ones, right? Like, why is Death at You trying to kill me? Why is his name Death at You? And why is he attacking me if I'm his friend? Two-faced.
The following creepypasta was found on the Some Ordinary Gamers fandom page, and it begins with a letter to someone named Nick. For the majority of this story, our protagonist will be the person writing said letter. He begins by saying, "Dear Nick, remember last month how you let me rip your game collection before your family moved? First of all, thanks. You've always been a really awesome friend. Now I'm not really sure how to start this, but I don't think we're going to get to talk too much after this." Our protagonist proceeds to tell his friend Nick that some important stuff was about to happen and that he wasn't sure if they would have another opportunity to talk. He goes on to say that he had issues trying to copy some of the games because of the copy protection. So in search for answers, he scoured the internet looking for programs to help. He came across a torrent site that had a Japanese program called Shikami Nenen. The description said that it meant 4 gods in heaven. Although upon researching that, it doesn't, and he even admits to that as well in the letter. What mattered more though was this was a program that answered his prayers. The directions for the installation seemed rather straightforward. Switch the computer to Japanese Unicode, run the installer, switch back to English, and apply a crack to make it work. Things got a little bizarre though. While the program was installing, it began playing a slideshow of various colors with static noise coming from his speakers. Perplexed by this, he searched the README file in the installation folder to find a message that read, "Files will be in unknown format. Rename .iso and mount external. Do not try to run." This made sense that the files would come out in an unknown format. I mean, it was a Japanese program. He checked the games and they all seemed to run just fine. No errors or copy fail that he could see. And he writes, "So I did the rest of them. It took a while and I got tired, but you know that. I had them back to you the next day." He goes on to tell his friend Nick about all the games he played and that he, in a platonic way, missed him. And after working his way through all of the converted game files, he found a few that he must have forgotten to rename. Just for the hell of it, he decided to see what would happen if he ran one of those files. The first error screen that appeared was all in Japanese, so he switched the computer back to Japanese, and to his dismay, the file opened just fine. The game file was for Portal 2. It wasn't like normal though. In the letter he describes the loading screen by saying, "It showed the inside of a dingy, run-down test chamber with Chell sprawled out on the ground. She had the portal gun in one hand, but her head and limbs were at odd angles. And the things on her legs, her long fall boots, they looked cracked with the strut things on the back bent out of shape. It looked like it was showing what would happen if the boots ever broke and she just hit the ground too hard." The sheer sight of this really started to freak him out. He chalked it up to some weird glitch or hack that was installed just to mess with people. Either way though, he kept playing. He writes, "Everything was darker and there was a kind of fog along the ground. Even in the part of the game where everything was clean and new, the picture you were supposed to stare at was just a red space. And the music was nothing but static. When he got to Wheatley in the game, he was much more sadistic than he had remembered. He kept asking him to say apple and then would interrupt with laughter saying, 'You can't, you're brain damaged.' Trying to escape this nightmare, he attempted to open another unnamed file. Need for Speed was next, but again he would regret opening this file. It just opened with a video showing a 15-car pileup while news reporters spoke about the death toll. Again, startled by what he found, he started to realize that under the Japanese Unicode, it seemed to make games much darker than usual. Believing that the program corrupted anything that you ran onto the Japanese version, he tested it out with a DVD copy of Inkheart. The movie played out as normal, the actors said the correct lines, that is, until the market scene. He writes, "I watched transfixed as a beggar that was never there before was kicked savagely from a well-dressed man and collapsed in a heap. A woman in a red coat twisted her son's arm until it looked like she popped it out of its socket, dragging him off screen as he resisted. A thug then ran up and stabbed an elderly woman in the stomach, taking her purse and running as the rest of the crowd just stepped around her bleeding body. I shut off the player feeling sick to my stomach." At this point he could no longer stand to have this corrupt program on his computer and began the process of uninstalling. Remember that weird screen with the static for music and rotating colors that appeared while downloading? Well, a similar thing began happening, except this time he could hear people crying and screaming for help as he watched in horror as a slideshow played of nothing but tragedy. There was photo after photo of crime scenes, accidents, disasters, people being vaporized by atomic bombs. He tried to look away, but he couldn't. He just sat there, numb almost, frozen in place while he felt the screams of the now deceased echoing through his ears. That's when he realized something. People turn away from tragedy, but he felt it was almost his purpose now to face the horror and tragedy in the world head on. He writes, "Horrible things happen all the time, everywhere, and we just pretend like it doesn't matter, like it doesn't affect us. It's not right. So, you see, that's why I'll be going away for a long time. Somebody has to do something about what's wrong in the world. Someone has to make them see. So I'll be the one to open people's eyes to the horror. I'll make this right." Now we turn to Nick, the person who receives this letter from his once dear friend. He details that 3 weeks after receiving this final message from his best friend, the police found him living in a bomb shelter of an abandoned house in their old neighborhood. He was wanted for a string of violent crimes, some of which included things the police referred to as ritualistic murder. He was wanted for arson, tampering with traffic to cause a major accident, and various poisons and bomb-making supplies were found in this hideout. No one, including Nick, could have ever seen this coming. He was a class president, a track star, and got along with everybody. Searching for answers as to why his friend snapped, he tried to find the program he spoke of, but couldn't find anything. Shikami was a type of Japanese demon, but the translation "four gods in heaven" still confused him. He writes, "I did a little more digging and found that kami is Japanese for God, and shi is four. Four also has a special connotation in Japan though, so it's considered an unlucky number, because it's pronounced the same way as their word for death."
And at 8, the Ballad of Tentu. There is a game called Planet Coaster where you just create an amusement park and have to keep it maintained. The game contains many tracks and each ride has its own unique one. The Ballad of Tentu is the song associated with the barrel wheel ride from that game. This author heard the song and for some reason fell in love. They couldn't describe the emotion they felt when the song came on. And they would constantly ride that ride so they could hear the song. But slowly, it's like the song grew and it was evolving. It had enough sentience to affect other rides. You are able to change the song that plays on each ride, but the author didn't know that yet. But slowly as he continued playing and growing his park, each new ride would eventually have that same song playing. It infected his game, and then it started to infect him. He heard the song everywhere. He would hear it when listening to any music, even Taylor Swift. Why would you listen to Taylor Swift? He still hears it to this day, so whatever you do, don't listen to the Ballad of Tentu. And at 7, Sentret. I was alone at night when I was 7. My parents had a date night and I was taking advantage, staying up late and playing Pokemon on my Nintendo DS. When I started my game, I was on the first route, and every Pokemon I would encounter was a Sentret. I damaged the first one but then ran away, but the next one that appeared looked like it had the same HP. It was the same level too. I did this 2 more times and every time the same Pokemon appeared. I always used to joke about if you would see the same Pokemon twice, it was following you, but now it seems like that statement is true. I flew to another route to get away, but lo and behold, he was still following me. I decided to catch it, but that was a big mistake. My Pokeball burst open, and the shrapnel somehow hurt my Pokemon to the point of fainting. Then, instead of throwing out another, I stepped in. The Sentret attacked me and clawed off my face, and now my avatar has been disfigured ever since. Yikes! You know how many cents I give? Tret.
Back in 2011, a game was reported to have been posted on a site called Escoteria Daily, a news and fanfiction site for an animated show, My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. The game was posted by a very anonymous user, and it's completely unknown as to who is responsible for developing it. When Bronies, the name for the My Little Pony fanboys, downloaded the game and booted it up, it seemed simple enough. You're playing as Luna, one of the My Little Ponies, on a basic platform level, being able to jump and navigate using the arrow keys. After about 20 seconds of playing though, or if you're standing still, images will flicker on your screen. One is of Pony Pinkie Pie with Zalgified eyes. The other was of Apple Bloom. Right after the image flickers on your screen, all of a sudden, one of 4 remixes of songs from the show will begin to play. And the game won't close, no matter what you do to shut down the program. Your mouse will freeze. Eventually, it will automatically close on its own. Afterwards, if players looked at the location on their computer where they saved the game, they would find a bunch of pictures similar to the image that appeared in the game that weren't originally on their computer, with text files also appearing labeled "The End is Nay," all of which contained one phrase when opened: the end is nay. While some believe that perhaps this was a virus disguised in a game, that wasn't the case. The game would save screenshots and text documents but proved to not be a virus after all. Perhaps it was just a prank. Almost 2 months later, on May 30th, 2011, another game was posted on the website. It became known as Luna Game 2. The game began in a similar fashion as the first, but the graphics were improved, and you could hold down the shift button now to run. But after you start running, cracks form on the ground and get bigger and bigger and bigger the further you get. The game will then jarringly cut to an image of a Zalgified Pinkamena, with white noise blasting out of your speakers. A second later, the game returns, but the background and blocks are all tinted red and you can only move slowly. Disturbing music plays in the background that is said to drive players mad. Unable to turn off the game, players must move forward until they reach a giant chasm in the ground and drop down into it. The background fades to black and a game over screen will appear with the Luna sprite continuing to fall. Unlike the first game, this one didn't create any extra files. It was simply just a game that would freeze your mouse and refuse to shut down properly prior to completing it. The saga doesn't end there. On June 11th of that same year, a third game would appear on the site, known as Luna Game 3. This one starts off with you playing as Luna in a very simple platform world, a looping environment that is set in a forest. The controls are the same, but as you progress the screen gets darker and darker, and the background music begins to distort and slow down. Static eventually begins to ring out of your speakers and the trees in the background begin to appear dark and bloody. If you listen closely, you can hear what sounds like ponies chattering in the distance. Eventually, as you push forward, a giant gap will appear. If you jump over it, a distorted version of Fluttershy appears and yells, "Come out." If you continue running forward, the level will continue to loop until you finally jump down into the gap, while Fluttershy yells out a distorted "Love me" in the background. Images will flash on your screen again, all disturbing versions of the ponies. And when the images stop, you'll see your Luna sprite lying on the ground, with her legs severed, covered in blood. After about 5 seconds, she'll open her eyes and the screen will flash disturbing close-ups of her face and a shriek will emit from your speakers. The game will then automatically shut down afterwards. On July 4th, the fourth game was posted on the website. Once again, it starts off in a similar fashion as the last three, except now you begin on a grassy cliff. It soon becomes apparent that there's only one thing you can do: jump off the cliff. Once you do it, you'll hear a splat noise, and text will appear on the screen that reads, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" which is a reference to the Haunted Majora's Mask game, another huge gaming creepypasta. Then the game will close, and if you try to reopen it, it won't work. But if you're patient, the game will reopen on its own. You'll see the words, "It didn't have to turn out like this," and "You didn't have to die" appear on your screen. Blood splatters will appear, and new text will then appear that reads, "But now you're in my world." That's when you'll hear a roar. And then Princess Luna will appear again, and you're in a new setting once more, which can only be described as a hellish landscape. You must run past and avoid a slew of obstacles, all while being bombarded with flashes of creepy images. If you manage to get through it all, you're once again forced to jump off of a cliff. When you do jump, it's almost as if the game glitches, with the music and images on your screen distorting in a very severe way. The terrain will randomly change, and you must climb up to a higher ground in order to scale a massive wall. The higher you get, the darker the screen becomes, with Pinky eventually appearing, laughing in the background. Eventually, the screen goes entirely black and the game shuts off. You won't be able to reopen the program. Text appears that reads, "Your fate is already sealed." And that's it. Almost a year later, on August 22nd, 2012, a game called Luna Game End was posted to the community website. It starts off just like the rest, and after walking forward for a while, you'll come across a very familiar cliff. When you jump off of it though, you land safely on the ground. But after walking some more, text will appear, dialogue from Luna that reads, "I'm really tired." She'll collapse, with more text appearing that says, "I'll just rest for a moment." The screen then fades to black and the music stops. And then you appear in an all-white world with only a single line below you to walk on. What follows is a strange existential experience, and by the end of it all, you're greeted with an image of a dead Luna. But according to users on the website, if you play through all of the games over again, at the end of the fifth game, there's a happy ending, with Luna stating that she's had a nightmare. But the game will flicker one final disturbing image of Pinkamena, and then it will close forever. The games have been said to traumatize players. Not many get to a second round of playthrough. It's a game series that many feel is the scariest that they've ever tried out, especially since the person or people behind it has managed to remain anonymous. It's hard to describe the feeling of dread and terror that you get while playing. But if you are curious, there has been several fan-made versions of the game that have appeared over the years that you can hunt down online and, are worth giving a go. So, there we have it, friends. Have you tried any of these games out? Do you think there's something more nefarious lingering under the surface? Now, it's not quite like the traditional creepypasta, but it's something that many have found pretty darn scary. Or hilarious, if you're the type to make fun of bronies.
In its sixth Bone World. This is a new creepypasta based on the new VR title Boneworks. This game involves you going inside of a game you were helping to develop and trying to debug it. However, this author, who goes by the_Lord, was playing this game on his brand new HTC Vive. The Lord was in the sewer level, and the enemies were dropping out of the ceiling. Wonderful. He was making his way through until he took a step too far, and a null body dropped on top of him. When this happened, the game immediately crashed and he ripped his headset off, terrified. He could still hear the null buddy's grunts and did his best to shake it off, but as he puts it, he ain't no Taylor Swift. What's with all the Taylor Swift reference? He went to go to bed, but as he entered his room, he heard the signature null buddy hello. As he closed the door, a null buddy was behind it and grabbed him while his back was turned. Lord threw him off, but the null buddy kept getting up. Nothing would stop this thing. He was being strangled until somehow someone ran in and stabbed the null with a knife. When the enemy dropped, he could see the savior was himself. And at 5, Dagon the Dark. While the wait feature has always been in the Elder Scrolls games, in Skyrim something happened to one player who was waiting for the shops to open. While waiting, the environment around you updates, NPCs moving and the sun moving as well, but while in Whiterun, a dark figure rose out of the ground and shot back in quickly, in around half a second. This user, after seeing this, went onto online forums to see if anyone had experienced this as well. The model appeared to be a dragon, but while typing they misspelled dragon, and thus the community named him Dagon the Dark. After coming back to their save, all their dragons were gone. They weren't even at word walls. They tried to start a new game, but it didn't start off normally. They started off at Dragon's Reach. The Jarl was missing, but you could still hear his voice saying you have to slay the beast. And if you decided to wait, he says please, and then the music stops until you leave. They head to the Western Watchtower to fight Mirmulnir, but instead they get sucked into dialogue. After the chat ends, Dagon shoots out of the tower and all NPCs start running away. He swallowed them one by one. There is more, and they may end up defeating him, but you'll have to read it for yourself.
Number 10, Lavender Town Syndrome. This is a very well-known creepypasta involving the song that plays in the Pokemon game when users reach Lavender Town. It was rumored that nearly 200 children committed suicide due to the tone affecting their minds. My first thought when reading this, it was something that I would have done to my little brother so that he would be too scared to play my Game Boy Color. Also, 200? Really? Perhaps there was a spike that coincidentally aligned with the release of the game, but 200 is a bold claim. Plus, blaming a video game instead of pointing out mental illness, depression, and bad parenting is just wrong. Busted. Number 9, Followed. This was a Fortnite creepypasta about a gamer who used Fortnite to help with his mental health after being in a car accident. He keeps seeing a rabbit with a ski mask in real life, which sounds adorable, number 1, but the player believes it's someone named the Bunnyman trying to kill him. And after playing in a solo match, he gets down to just one player named Frank, who he believes is the Bunnyman. Frank keeps saying, "I dare you to kill me," which could just be great trolling for a video game, especially considering the kid was out of ammo in the game. He then is said to see the Bunnyman in his living room, which causes him to have a heart attack. Again, if my little brother was seeing a rabbit with a ski mask, I would have definitely snuck up wearing a mask just to scare him. That's busted. Number 8, Blood Brothers. This was a Call of Duty creepypasta that I did about two half-brothers who were aspiring to become live stream gamers. Their father favored the one brother so much over the other it was ridiculous. He would buy him every new console, new video games, and all the equipment he needed to stream, while the other brother got the shaft and was stuck on older consoles like some sort of millennial Cinderella, except his glass slipper was spiking his father and brother's G Fuel with rat poison. The weird thing about this story is that it's from his perspective, not someone telling the story like, yo, lock this guy up. He admitted to murdering his family on a creepypasta wiki page. If he wanted to get back at them, he could have just easily put laxatives in their drinks. Then they would have made crappy pastas in their pants. Busted. Number 7, Hidden Mod. After a player used a mod to alter his prestige in Call of Duty, he clicks on a different mod called prestige.mod, with the I in prestige being replaced with the number 1. Then his game goes crazy and he gets a cryptic message saying, "Ghosts coming, ooh, scary stuff." Sounds like something a troll would have put into the code to mess with hackers. Then he gets a knock at his door and it's a head. Well, it's not a real head, it's like a mannequin. And don't want to get too crazy with this story, am I right? Then it's all capped off with him being banned. Scary for him, amazing for everyone else who doesn't cheat while playing COD. Busted. Number 6, don't play track 1. This is the story of a gamer who buys a Dreamcast along with Sonic Adventure, and for some reason he decides to put the game in his CD player, which he then says causes his speakers to leak mercury. Like, stop. I've never ever heard of a speaker that contains mercury. I'll continue though. He actually tries to put the disc back into the Dreamcast, but obviously he gets error messages. Then he does what every rage quitter does, and he smashes the disc. He then continues to wake up in a cold sweat after having nightmares of nearly drowning in mercury. Well, guess what, kids? If you're drinking too much G Fuel and have a poor diet, you'll sweat a ton in your sleep. Should've had a V8. Busted. Number 5, Games of Hell. This Call of Duty creepypasta was about a gamer who entered into a custom game on the map Vacant. He said he could smell burning flesh, and he also said that every time he killed a player, it sounded like they were being stabbed. Plus, he had prestige 5 times after the game, apparently 1 for each soul he took while playing the game. His mom then busts through the door to say that he had been in there for 5 days. Kids, if you lock yourself in your room and play COD for 5 days straight, that smell of burning flesh is probably your eyes melting from staring at a screen for that long. The players who sound like they're being stabbed is the same sound anyone makes when they're killed by a camper like yourself. And of course, you're going to prestige 5 times you've been playing COD for 120 hours. That's busted. Number 4, The Whisperer. This Fortnite scary story is another reason why parents need to keep an eye on their kids playing video games. It's about a boy named Timmy, classic name, who after having no friends who want to play Fortnite with him, he meets a user on a PlayStation community board who says he's the best at Fortnite, except he spelt it Fortnight. Red flag, Timmy. The dude turns out to be a 31-year-old man who happens to live in his neighborhood. Of course the guy is awful, and Timmy ends up blocking him. He then apparently receives creepy voice messages from the guy saying that he shouldn't have done that. Right there, he should have yelled stranger danger and called his parents. Instead, he just has a long text conversation with his friend and tells him about this psycho. He even scares his friend by saying the guy was in his house, but don't worry, the neighbor knocked him out, so it's all good now. He then tells the friend to come over and play Fortnite. The old playing the victim card for friendship or whatever. Shame on you, Timmy. That one's busted. Number 3, Seeing Things. Here's another one of those scary stories where the person writing the story is also the person who dies in the end. If I ever die from a video game, I doubt I'd want to come back as a ghost to write a creepypasta. In this story, a boy named Nathan loses a close friend to cancer and begins seeing him everywhere and even hearing his voice in his headset. His parents believe this traumatic event caused him to become a paranoid schizophrenic. The ghost author, says he was in the therapist's office when his friend's ghost told him to jump out the window or something so that they could be together. I highly doubt that if a therapist had a paranoid schizophrenic in his office, he would just allow him to slowly walk up and go to the window, open it, get on his hands and knees, and jump out, and at no point try to stop him. That one's busted. And at number 2, Ben Drowned. This is a pretty famous creepypasta with many story arcs about a haunted version of the Zelda game Majora's Mask. Apparently the gist of the story is that the game is super messed up. It's a hack copy. It happens all the time. And on top of that, the player believes a ghost by the name of Ben is responsible in making his computer do crazy things like closing out his windows, moving his mouse, turning off his computer. Sounds like this guy just got hacked in general. You need to update your security, pal. Plus, have you ever heard of remote desktop access programs? They're programs that allow people to control your computer from different locations. So that one is busted. Lastly, at number 1, Sonic.exe. And this is a legendary creepypasta, and I'm ready to throw some shade at it. First flaw is there's several different stories involving the game Sonic.exe. Second, it's clearly a hacked version of the game that this kid just found, and as a result, he begins believing that Sonic is trying to kill him in real life or looking directly at him from the screen. And this is a common theme for creepypastas, the idea that the character is staring right at them. This is actually an optical illusion. It's a way of creating art called linear perspective, a technique that uses a single point as the focus, and in linear perspective, all lines in the painting go to a common point. It's the same reason why railroad tracks appear to vanish in the distance and create the impression of depth and distance. As for seeing things, well, you may just want to lay off the scary video games, kids. That one's busted.
And at 4, Misfortune.gb. Misfortune is supposedly a game for the original Game Boy that saw a limited release. No known hard copies or even ROMs exist, so all information about this game is derived from personal accounts and some scattered screenshots. The players seem to control a young boy in a strange building. After a little bit, you are confronted by an evil being. The character never identifies himself, but people seem to think of him as the devil. The entity will challenge you, and upon accepting the challenge, you are sent to a difficult puzzle you must complete. You progress through rooms while trying to find a way out. One of these puzzles being 4 cabins on a screen with a dialogue box that reads, "Choose wrong and misfortune will befall your loved ones." Make any mistake throughout the game and the screen will cut to black, show a more detailed image of the demon, and "I am God here" will appear in a bloody style text. Ever since the 1990s, people have been discussing side effects of this game. Players claim to have begun experiencing chronic depression and dread only moments after seeing the game over screen. People who claim this are now thought to have died, or disappeared because their accounts had become inactive. Some people believe that viewing the image of this character after losing the game puts some form of curse on the player who witnesses it. And at 3, Pale Luna. The premise for the Pale Luna legend is apparently someone had circulated some copies of a mysterious text-based adventure around the San Francisco Bay Area. At its core, Pale Luna looked like any other hastily crafted text adventure. Lines of text would form on screen asking for specific commands, and putting in these commands would cause another line to appear, such as "You're in a forest, go left," "You're in a forest, go north," "You're in a forest," things like that. Many gamers became frustrated by the fact that Pale Luna would crash if the wrong command was inputted. One player remained diligent in finishing the quest and had won the game and was given some coordinates. The player then followed them to their location, where the body of a young girl, which had previously gone missing, was found. This reminds me of the premise for some movie. I may be wrong, but I feel like I've heard this concept before, you know? If you know what I'm referring to, let me know in the comments, because I have no clue.
The Theater was a game that, when released, was sold in a plain white case, with nothing but a sprite of what has since been named the Ticket Taker, a poorly drawn bald white man with large red lips wearing a red vest over top of a white shirt, and black pants. Completely expressionless. Now, according to legend, if someone smashes the disc inside of the case, the expression of the ticket taker will actually change, with his face looking back at you angrily. Other than the ticket taker, nothing else is said to be on the case. No title, no dev logos, nothing. Just the ticket taker. Some people who got their hands on this game would give up before even playing it. It was notorious for its inability to install correctly. Upon reaching the licensing agreement, your computer would freeze. The agreement itself would also feature a blank line for where the developer studio's name was supposed to be. Now apparently if you tried rebooting your computer when it froze on the agreement without ejecting the disk and hit I agree as soon as the computer started back up, the installation would continue. Now after it's installed, things only get weirder. When the game starts up, it goes straight to a menu with a sprite of a movie theater's exterior on a completely empty street. The options you're given are New Game, Load, and of course, Options. If you select Options, the game immediately crashes and shuts down. Clicking on Load does absolutely nothing even if you do have a saved game. So really the only choice is New Game. Now when the game begins, you are in first person view, standing in an empty movie theater lobby with only the ticket taker standing in front of a dark hallway, which must lead to the cinemas. There's a bunch of poorly drawn movie posters on the walls that are all illegible. All you can really do is approach the ticket taker. When you do, a low quality sound clip plays of a man saying, "Thank you, please enjoy the movie," along with a text box spelling out the exact same dialogue. You walk down the hallway, the screen fades to black, and when it returns, you're back in the empty movie theater lobby. From there, you keep doing the same action over and over again. And while that may sound absolutely awful and mundane, as you continue to repeat the actions, small little things, differences will occur. Now, it's never been recorded how many times you have to approach the ticket taker in order for these peculiarities to occur. Some believe it is completely random. The first strange event that most players experience is when they return to the empty theater lobby. The ticket taker is gone. When you walk down the hallway, the sound clip still plays and the text box still appears, despite the ticket taker's absence. And when you walk down that hallway, the screen doesn't fade you back into the lobby. The sounds of your footsteps can still be heard whenever you continue to push the up button on your keyboard to move forward. It feels like an endless black hallway. The tension gets really intense, and players reported feeling immense anxiety as this occurred. Eventually, it gets to a point where the player is no longer able to move forward. Then, after a few quiet moments, a sprite appears. It is said to be the same sprite as the ticket taker, but with one major difference. His head is now a swirl. Players reported feeling physically ill when seeing the sprite, calling it the swirly headman. Nothing happens in the game for several moments until, all of a sudden, an abrupt piercing screech will pour out of your speakers, and the game will begin to glitch severely. This is said to go on for several minutes. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, the player is returned to the empty theater lobby, with the game no longer glitching out. If players were bold enough to keep at it and continue to walk down the hallway, they'd experience the initial normal cycle of the game for a few times. Some have claimed to see the swirly headman appear in the corner of the theater, with a yelp sound effect playing. Then after a few cycles, upon returning to the theater lobby, players will eventually see the ticket taker sprite, pacing back and forth, except his legs aren't moving. The sprite is hopping instead. His eyes and mouth appear to have become wide, making him look as if he was worried. Some players have claimed the images on the movie posters would be replaced by an image of the swirly headman too. Upon approaching the ticket taker, a different sound clip would play, which, because of its low quality, has been highly debated as to what exactly is being said. The text box below the ticket taker contains a series of corrupted characters, making the words illegible. Some swear that the sound clip is saying, "Never reach the other levels." Now once you speak to him, the screen fades out and returns the player back to the starting point in the theater lobby. The theater hallway is now blocked by a brick wall sprite. If you approach it and touch it, the game will immediately crash. Now after that, no one has ever figured out what to do next to progress, or how to access these other levels the ticket taker had mentioned. No one knows why seeing the swirly headman causes such acute panic in players playing the game. And all of the original copies of the game seem to have completely disappeared, with those who managed to find bootleg versions of the game popping it into the computers only to discover that the discs are empty.
In it too, the truth about Fort Zancudo. Getting only 5 upvotes on Reddit, this player was having an ordinary GTA 5 online session with his friends, 5 stars, VIP work, strip club, and raiding the military base. But that last one is where it got scary. Next to the airstrip there is a tower you can enter and climb up all the way. At the top there appears to be some form of control room, where there are typically a couple of guards, but you can easily take them out. The author and his friend were role-playing, pretending like they were gathering intel, so they were shooting out every monitor they could. After shooting one, however, they could see a door open on the airstrip from the window. They rushed down to see what was going on, but the author's friend gets killed by a tank. The author gets in and his game freezes. When it gets fixed, he's in what looks like a lab, with surgical desks and empty status tubes everywhere. They were odd, malformed, they looked alien. The fog inside them disappeared and the tubes opened, dropping the creatures to the ground. They were grey aliens, but not like those costumes normally found in game. The author was on a call with his friend when his phone dies, and when he goes to plug it in, the lights in the game turn red. As they do, the aliens get up and start charging at the player. He can't equip weapons. His character won't move. Instead, he shoots himself in the head. There's more, but you'll have to read it yourself, because I don't have forever. And at one, painting. We all know about the Minecraft paintings. There's actually a specific set of paintings you're allowed to get, and any other painting is inconceivable unless you have a mod or resource pack. However, this story of a painting comes from a girl who claims she got a cursed painting using vanilla Minecraft textures, and that after she got it, it ruined her world. The painting was supposedly a picture of Herobrine, glowing white eyes and a forest behind them, but somehow the background kept changing. At first it was dark, but then it was day, and then it went back to night but the forest was on fire. Then he was in the nether, then the end. Then he came back and he was holding the ender dragon's head at his side. It stayed like this for the rest of the game. She got to the nether and then went to the end to fight the dragon, but the dragon was already dead. The egg was on the portal and the dragon's head was beside it. When she came back she noticed what had happened. The painting was showing Herobrine's activity through the world. She saw the forest fire that he had set that was coming towards her and she had no way to stop it.